What drives a man to give his life for a code? In medieval Japan, that question forged warriors who became legends, the samurai. When Oda Nobunaga fell to betrayal in 1582, few expected his avenger to be a former peasant. Yet Toyotomi Hideyoshi, once a sandal-bearer in Nobunaga's army, rose swiftly through wit, loyalty, and unmatched political cunning. Hideyoshi moved fast. He crushed the traitor Akechi Mitsuhide at the Battle of Yamazaki, avenging his lord. Then, through diplomacy and force, he brought rival daimyo to heel. By 1590, he had unified nearly all of Japan, not as a shogun, which his birth disqualified him from, but as Kampaku, imperial regent. A master builder of both alliances and fortresses, Hideyoshi constructed Osaka Castle, a symbol of strength and stability, yet his rule was far from peaceful. To preserve order, he imposed strict social reforms. Only samurai could bear arms, farmers were bound to their land, class mobility was frozen. These laws solidified the samurai's dominance, but at the cost of freedom. Driven by ambition, Hideyoshi even launched invasions of Korea in 1592 and 1597. These brutal campaigns drained Japan's strength and ended in failure. He died in 1598, his legacy uncertain, his young son too weak to rule. With Japan unified and war suppressed, the samurai faced an identity crisis. For centuries, their lives had been defined by combat. Now, in Tokugawa Japan, there were no wars to fight, only rules to follow. Samurai became government officials, tax collectors, and moral exemplars. They lived in castle towns, wore their swords by law, and received stipends from their lords. But without warfare, many fell into debt. Some turned to teaching, others to philosophy, and a few, disillusioned, abandoned the code altogether. Yet Bushido didn't vanish. In fact, it evolved. Samurai scholars wrote manuals on conduct, stressing loyalty, duty, and self-sacrifice as spiritual virtues rather than battlefield necessities. This was the age of Yamaga Soko and Hagakure, thinkers who redefined Bushido for a world without war. Duels still occurred, but they were rare, ritualized, and often condemned. The sword, once soaked in blood, became a symbol of tradition, not violence. Still, unrest simmered beneath the order. Some samurai chafed under the weight of obedience, dreaming of the glory their ancestors once knew. They were warriors with no war, and in peace, many found their deadliest battle was with irrelevance. Though the samurai as a class vanished with the Meiji Restoration, their legacy endures, etched into Japan's soul, culture, and identity. Bushido, once a warrior's creed, became a national ethos. Loyalty, discipline, and self-sacrifice were no longer just values of the battlefield. They became virtues of modern citizenship, education, and even industry. The image of the samurai, stoic, honorable, and unyielding, was repurposed to forge a unified Japan in a new world. Their spirit lived on in literature, in cinema, in the silent rituals of tea ceremonies and martial arts. Their swords, once tools of war, became revered artifacts, symbols of craftsmanship, philosophy, and resolve. Yet the true legacy of the samurai is not in steel or conquest. It lies in their ability to evolve. They adapted through centuries of chaos and peace, from battlefield champions to scholars, from rulers to rebels. Their fall was not a failure, it was a transformation. The samurai are gone, but their echo lingers in every bowed head, every act of quiet courage, every moment when honor matters more than gain. They were more than warriors. They were Japan's soul, shaped by fire and remembered in silence. In 1853, black smoke rose over Japan's eastern horizon. Commodore Matthew Perry had arrived with 4 American warships, demanding that Japan open its ports. For over 2 centuries, the Tokugawa shogunate had enforced isolation. Now, the outside world had come knocking, loudly. The samurai, long defenders of the nation, were stunned. Their swords meant little against cannons and steam-powered vessels. Diplomacy failed to delay the inevitable. The following year, under pressure and fear, Japan signed the Treaty of Kanagawa, ending centuries of seclusion. To many samurai, this was humiliation. The very guardians of Japan's sovereignty had been sidelined. Some called for modernization, others demanded the foreigners be expelled. But the real crisis ran deeper. The samurai's role, once sacred, was slipping away. Protests erupted. Clans like Satsuma and Choshu, frustrated by the shogunate's weakness, began mobilizing for change. Young, idealistic samurai whispered of restoring imperial rule and reforming Japan from within. Old loyalties fractured. The Tokugawa could no longer protect Japan or its warriors from a new world. The age of isolation had ended, and with it, the last illusions of samurai supremacy began to crumble. The Heian period, once a golden age of courtly art and refinement, ended not with poetry, but with blood. Behind the silken screens of Kyoto, noble families grew fat with power. But outside the capital, the provinces burned. Tax collectors were ignored. Bandits roamed free. The imperial army, more ceremonial than practical, could not control the chaos. As power slipped from the emperor's grasp, regional lords, called daimyo, seized the moment. They raised their own private militias, loyal not to the throne, but to their land and bloodline. These militias became the first generation of what would evolve into the samurai. Meanwhile, two mighty clans, the Taira and the Minamoto, saw opportunity in the weakness. Their warriors clashed in open fields, ambushed rivals in mountain passes, and scorched villages in the name of honor. But it was more than rivalry. It was a question of who should truly rule Japan, a fading emperor cloaked in tradition, or warriors who bled for the land. The fall of the Heian court wasn't just political decay, it was the crucible from which the samurai emerged. No longer courtiers or retainers, they became something new, the steel behind Japan's future. In the ashes of the Heian period, Japan stood divided. The emperor's court grew distant, and the countryside burned with lawlessness. Landowners, known as daimyo, could no longer rely on the crumbling imperial army. Instead, they turned to local warriors. These fighters, skilled in archery, horseback combat, and unwavering loyalty, would soon evolve into a new warrior class, the samurai. Clad in lacquered armor and wielding curved blades, the early samurai were more than soldiers. They were enforcers of order, guardians of family honor. Their loyalty wasn't to a crown, but to their lord, unto death. Their rise marked a shift from courtly politics to brutal, localized power. By the late 12th century, two powerful clans, the Taira and the Minamoto, would clash in a war that would change Japan forever. But even before swords were drawn, the samurai had already begun shaping a code that would echo across centuries. Bushido, the way of the warrior. This is their story. From humble beginnings to battlefield glory, from strict codes to ultimate sacrifice, this is the rise of the samurai. In 1701, a single act of violence shook the Tokugawa peace. When Lord Asano Naganori was provoked and insulted by the shogun's corrupt official, Kira Yoshinaka, he drew his sword inside Edo Castle, an unpardonable offense. Asano was ordered to commit seppuku immediately. His domain was dissolved. His samurai were cast out. These now masterless warriors became ronin, men without lords, disgraced and despised. But they did not forget. For over a year, 47 of Asano's former retainers plotted quietly, pretending to scatter. Then, on a snowy night in 1703, they struck. Storming Kira's mansion, they fought with precision and honor. Kira was slain, and the ronin presented his head at their master's grave. Their actions captivated the nation. Some called them heroes of Bushido, loyal to their lord, even in death. Others saw them as dangerous rebels who defied the shogunate's law. The shogun, caught between justice and order, sentenced them to honorable death. They committed seppuku with calm dignity. The story of the 47 ronin became legend, proof that even in a time of peace, the soul of the samurai still burned. Their blades had been sheathed, but never dulled. In 1338, Ashikaga Takauji became shogun, founding the Muromachi Ashikaga shogunate. Unlike the centralized rule of Kamakura, this new regime was fragmented, constantly negotiating power between the military elite and the imperial court. While Takauji ruled from Kyoto, his control over the provinces was tenuous at best. The Ashikaga shoguns depended heavily on alliances with powerful daimyo and samurai families. To keep the balance, they distributed land and titles freely, but with each reward, they weakened their grip. Loyalty was no longer sacred, it became transactional. Culturally, however, the period flourished. Zen Buddhism spread among the samurai class, influencing their discipline and art. Rock gardens, ink painting, and tea ceremonies became symbols of refinement and inner calm, even as the nation drifted toward chaos. Still, the peace was thin, factions formed, families feuded, and central authority continued to unravel. By the mid-15th century, rival daimyo were stockpiling arms and fortifying castles. The Ashikaga shogunate had laid the foundation for something far more volatile. The sword that built the Ashikaga rule would soon turn against it, plunging Japan into its darkest and most violent chapter, the Sengoku Jidai, the Warring States period. By the 1860s, the Tokugawa shogunate teetered on the edge of collapse. Foreign powers had forced open Japan's ports, sparking political chaos. Within the nation, two visions clashed, one clinging to tradition, the other demanding reform. And at the heart of this storm stood the samurai, torn between past and future. Young samurai from western domains like Satsuma and Choshu spearheaded the resistance. Disillusioned with the shogunate's failure to protect Japan's sovereignty, they rallied behind the idea of Sono Joy, revere the emperor, expel the barbarians. But as they studied Western technology and tactics, their goal evolved, not rejection, but transformation. In 1867, Tokugawa Yoshinobu, the last shogun, formally resigned his position, hoping to preserve influence in a new government. But conflict erupted. In 1868, imperial forces marched on Edo, igniting the Boshin War. The shogunate's troops, many still loyal samurai, fought bravely, but the tide had turned. By 1869, imperial victory was complete. The emperor was restored to power. The shogunate, which had ruled Japan for over 250 years, was gone. As the samurai rose to power, so too did a code to guide their lives. Bushido, the way of the warrior. It was never written in a single book, but it lived in every oath sworn, every enemy faced, and every death embraced without fear. Bushido taught loyalty above all. A samurai was expected to serve his lord until death, without hesitation. Honor was sacred. Dishonor, whether in defeat, cowardice, or betrayal, was worse than death. So when disgrace came, many chose seppuku, a ritual suicide, to restore their name. The code was shaped by many forces: Shinto purity, Buddhist selflessness, and Confucian loyalty. A samurai was not only a killer, but also a guardian of balance and justice. They trained not just in swordsmanship, but also in poetry, calligraphy, and moral philosophy. In an age of shifting loyalties and constant warfare, Bushido was a compass. It bound the samurai together, not just as fighters, but as a brotherhood guided by duty, self-sacrifice, and stoic resolve. Bushido did not promise wealth or peace, it promised meaning, and for the samurai, that was enough. Though the samurai had repelled the Mongols, their victory came at a cost. The Kamakura shogunate, already stretched thin, could not properly reward the warriors who had defended Japan. With no spoils of war from a foreign enemy, many samurai returned home bitter and unpaid. Discontent spread through the warrior class. The shogunate's authority, once firm under Minamoto no Yoritomo, began to rot under weak successors. The real power shifted to the Hojo clan, who acted as regents behind the throne, hoarding control and silencing dissent. As famine and unrest grew, so did the samurai's dissatisfaction. They were trained to follow loyalty and justice, but now they saw only corruption and neglect. With no foreign threat to unite them, old rivalries reignited. Samurai began turning their swords inward, against fellow clans, against the regime, even against their own lords. The once mighty Kamakura government had become brittle, its grip on Japan loosened, even as it tried to tighten control. By the early 14th century, rebellion simmered just beneath the surface, and soon that rebellion would erupt, led not by a warrior, but by a determined emperor, ready to reclaim what was lost. Chapter 4. Yoritomo and the birth of the shogunate. In 1192, Minamoto no Yoritomo stood triumphant, not just as a war hero, but as the first shogun of Japan. The emperor still sat on the throne in Kyoto, but real power now rested in Kamakura, where Yoritomo established the country's first military government, the Bakufu. The title shogun meant barbarian subduing general, but in truth, it marked a revolution. No longer would Japan be governed by scholars and court rituals. Under Yoritomo, a warrior's code ruled the land. Justice came swiftly, often by the sword, and land was distributed to loyal samurai who pledged themselves to his cause. This new system cemented the samurai's place at the heart of Japanese society. They weren't just bodyguards or warriors. They became landowners, judges, and enforcers. Samurai loyalty to their lord was now tied to politics, property, and survival. Yet Yoritomo ruled with suspicion. Even his own brother, Yoshitsune, celebrated as a military genius, was declared a traitor and hunted. The shogunate was born in blood and maintained through fear. But one thing was clear. The age of emperors was fading. The samurai, with their swords and their oaths, now held Japan's fate in their calloused hands. In 1274, Japan faced a threat unlike any before, the Mongol Empire. Under Kublai Khan, the mightiest army on earth turned its gaze eastward. The samurai, trained in single combat and loyalty to their lord, now faced an enemy that fought in terrifying unity and overwhelming numbers. The first Mongol fleet landed in Kyushu, bringing foreign tactics, smoke bombs, coordinated infantry assaults, and volleys of arrows that darkened the sky. The samurai were stunned. Their traditional duels meant nothing against the relentless advance of disciplined Mongol formations. Yet Japan was not defenseless. The samurai regrouped, adapting swiftly, and fought fiercely to repel the invaders. Then nature intervened. A sudden, violent storm, later called kamikaze or divine wind, tore through the Mongol fleet, sinking ships and scattering survivors. But the Mongols returned in 1281, this time with a colossal force. For months, the samurai fought from behind stone walls, resisting wave after wave. Again, a typhoon struck. The invaders were drowned, broken, defeated, not by steel alone, but by wind and fate. These invasions united Japan against a common enemy and proved the strength of the samurai spirit. For the first time, the warriors had fought not for a lord, but for a nation. By the 18th century, the Tokugawa system seemed unshakable, but beneath its surface, deep fractures had begun to form. The peace was holding, but at a cost the samurai could no longer ignore. Many samurai had grown poor. Fixed stipends no longer matched rising prices. Unable to farm or trade without losing status, some fell into debt, selling heirlooms or taking loans from rising merchant families, once considered beneath them. Power was shifting, not by sword, but by coin. Meanwhile, the rigid class system began to blur. Wealthy merchants lived in luxury, while proud samurai tightened their belts. The once clear hierarchy wobbled under the weight of hypocrisy. The samurai still wore their two swords, but many no longer wielded influence. Discontent brewed. Small peasant uprisings and regional famines exposed the government's growing inability to respond. The shogunate clung to tradition while the world outside Japan changed rapidly. Whispers of reform and rebellion echoed through castle corridors. The samurai, once the architects of order, now found themselves trapped in it, guardians of a system beginning to decay. The age of the samurai was not yet over, but the shadows were lengthening, and the winds of change were rising. When Toyotomi Hideyoshi died in 1598, a power vacuum threatened to shatter the fragile peace. Among the contenders stood Tokugawa Ieyasu, a cautious, calculating daimyo who had survived the violence of the Sengoku era through alliances, betrayals, and restraint. Ieyasu had served Nobunaga, then Hideyoshi, but now, with Hideyoshi's heir too young to rule, he made his move. Tensions erupted into war in 1600 at the Battle of Sekigahara, where Ieyasu led the Eastern Army against loyalists of the Toyotomi clan. The battle was brutal and decisive. With well-planned strategy and timely betrayals from within the enemy ranks, Ieyasu emerged victorious. Over 30,000 were killed, and the power of the Toyotomi was broken. In 1603, Ieyasu was granted the title of shogun by the emperor. With that, the Tokugawa shogunate was born, marking the final chapter of samurai ascendancy. But unlike his predecessors, Ieyasu did not seek constant war. He wanted peace, on his terms. He began reshaping Japan into a rigid, orderly society where samurai remained at the top, but the sword was sheathed. For the first time in centuries, unity had been achieved, but it came with surveillance, restriction, and silence. By the late 1400s, Japan shattered. The central government was a shadow. The Ashikaga shoguns no longer ruled, they merely survived. Power lay in the hands of local daimyo, each backed by loyal samurai armies, each determined to rule. This was the Sengoku Jidai, the age of the warring states. A century and a half of ceaseless war, betrayal, and ambition. Provinces became battlefields. Alliances shifted like wind. Daimyo seized castles, burned villages, and raised their banners in pursuit of dominance. Samurai thrived in this chaos. Their skill and loyalty became currency. Entire families lived by the sword and died by it. Mercenaries, monks, and even farmers took up arms as lines between classes blurred. Honor still mattered, but survival often mattered more. Tactics evolved. Large-scale battles replaced ritualized duels. Spears, arquebuses, and clever fortifications changed how wars were fought. The old code of Bushido endured, but it adapted to a blood-soaked reality. In this time of uncertainty, legends were born, warlords whose ambition would reshape Japan forever. Among them, 3 names would rise from the ashes of war: Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu. In 1868, the Meiji Restoration began, an era of radical transformation. Power returned to the emperor in name, but real change came from young leaders determined to modernize Japan at lightning speed. The feudal world unraveled almost overnight. The samurai, once the backbone of the nation, were stripped of their privileges. Their stipends were abolished, their right to bear swords revoked. The class itself was dissolved. Many were absorbed into the new bureaucracy or army, while others fell into poverty, clinging to fading honor in a world that no longer needed them. New conscripted armies replaced the old warrior class. Railways, factories, Western-style uniforms, everything changed. For samurai raised on the blade and bushido, it was a cultural death. Some resisted. In 1877, Saigo Takamori, a revered samurai and former Meiji leader, led the Satsuma Rebellion, a last, desperate stand to defend the samurai way. Thousands perished. The rebellion failed. Japan moved forward. The era of modernization had no room for warriors of the past. And so, after centuries of power, sacrifice, and honor, the samurai vanished. Not with a roar, but with a bow, a tear, and the whisper of a sheathed sword. Becoming a samurai was not a matter of birth alone. It was a lifelong discipline forged in hardship and repetition. From the moment a boy could walk, his training began. Wooden swords in hand, young samurai in training learned the foundations of kenjutsu, the art of the sword. Physical strength was only part of the journey. Mental discipline, emotional control, and razor-sharp focus were equally vital. A samurai's mind had to be calm under pressure, capable of striking without hesitation and dying without regret. Training included horseback riding, archery, hand-to-hand combat, and strategy. Hours were spent repeating sword forms until every movement became instinct. Failure was not punished harshly. It was expected, even welcomed, as a teacher. The goal was perfection, not pride. But swordsmanship alone didn't make a warrior noble. Samurai were taught to read, write poetry, and practice calligraphy. A beautiful mind was considered as honorable as a deadly hand. By the time a young samurai was ready for battle, his blade was merely an extension of his spirit. Victory was not the goal. Conduct in battle was. Even in bloodshed, a samurai's dignity had to remain untarnished. This balance of beauty and brutality defined the samurai soul.